Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah, everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. A little trouble with the equipment this morning at the very last second. Jason, thank you for engineering the broadcast today. I'm Vin Finelli. Captain John Ragan's with us. Welcome, Captain John Ragan.
Oh boy, is it going to be a show, Vincent.
Yeah, it is. And John, what makes today a special day for you and me?
Well, on February 22nd, 2012 was the very first time I was on USA Prepares, so this is our 9th anniversary show.
Okay. Thank you for being with us today. Captain John, I have a couple things that I wanted to mention, and I was going to read that email that you sent me about the conditions that you were experiencing in Texas. Did you want to start with just a recap of what that is in your words?
Oh, boy. It is, and we've been fortunate. Our power went out about 2 o'clock Monday morning. Those first 25 hours, we had maybe a total of 1 hour of power off and on. It took until Wednesday, about 10:15 in the morning, before our power came back on and has stayed on. And like I say, we're the fortunate ones. We're now at a point where about half of Texans either don't have water or are under boil orders. And if you have an all-electric home with no power, it's kind of hard to boil water. And the roads, they're not they're not extremely bad, especially here. Most of what we got was snow, and it's not an ice storm. The trees and the power lines were clear here in that regard. But as you drive and the temperature remains below freezing, that snow does get packed down and becomes more problematic to drive. The big challenges, especially for us in those early days, is how do you fix food? Because we pretty much eliminated processed food, which means that you have to cook it, and if you don't have power in an all-electric place, that's kind of difficult. And when you live in an apartment, you're not allowed to have grills, whether it's charcoal or propane. So we ventured out. Part of the reason we could stay in our car and get warm for a little bit. And because the roads were so bad, a lot of businesses just plain closed. So even if they had power, they were not open. When we first ventured out on Monday, we headed south to Main Drag, and places like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, they were closed. Before leaving the area, I thought, let's go ahead and check the Waffle House, and it was open. We had a little bit of a wait because, one, Waffle Houses are not that big to begin with, and two, because of COVID, there's even less capacity available. And we got there at a good time, because by the time we left, there was even more people waiting in line just to get a bite to eat. We went out later that afternoon, early afternoon, tried a different direction, We were able to find a Whataburger that was open. However, only the drive-thru was open. So we got in line, and I don't know exactly how many cars were in front of us. When we turned the corner, I was able to count 12. So I'm guessing there was about 24 in front of us when we started. That took an hour and a half for us to make it through to the window. And if you think that's bad, I read about a place in Houston. There was a Burger King open, similar situation, and the line was 4 hours long. Like I say, it's nasty. I don't know how many of these places are still open because places are not able to be resupplied. I've read accounts of, grocery stores, basically being stripped bare, and that's the ones that, didn't lose power. Those that lost power, they had to toss most of their refrigerated and frozen goods. Go ahead.
Okay. So what was the coldest temperature that you experienced in your area of Texas?
Yeah, we guess I think that was Tuesday morning. No, it's Wednesday morning. Bottomed out at a -1. And when we were able to get news on, the meteorologist said that was the coldest it's been in North Texas in over 70 years. So almost nobody alive around here today even remembers that. Because even if they were alive, they were probably very young. So it is extreme. Now, one of the big issues is what caused this problem, obviously besides the freezing temperatures. And there's multiple things going on. One, Texas, or let's say most of Texas, is on its own grid. There's some parts of Texas, some in southeast Texas, northeast Texas, the Panhandle, and far west Texas that are parts of other grids. But I don't remember the exact story, but it goes back to World War II as to why Texas has its own grid. And you'll read reports that they did it to escape federal regulation. That may be somewhat true today. They don't connect so they can have more control over the grid. But that's not why it was set up. It was set up because of World War II. And there were, the obvious problems of the wind farm being down. About half of the turbines froze up. But I read a report where ERCOT, which is the organization that controls the power grid, they knew that, wind is less in the winter, and they weren't counting on the full production power, but even so, they lost about a third of what they were expecting to have just from the wind. But it was all modes of power generation. We had a nuclear plant in South Texas, which hardly ever sees temperatures, serious enough to cause problems. One of their pumps went out. I don't know if it froze or broke or what. So they had to shut down one of the reactors, which brought a lot of that generation offline. A lot of the natural gas generation went down because equipment at the wellheads froze and they couldn't get a supply of gas, or with the electricity out, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy type situation where the pumps went down to move the gas down the line. And coal plants had problems because the precipitation had frozen the coal piles into big blocks of coal. They couldn't just go in and get it and put it in their furnaces. Plus, they had other equipment to do that break down on them. So it was like one thing after another. And it's a tremendous amount of energy that was supposed to be on the grid wasn't. And it was so serious that we were either minutes or seconds away from the entire grid going down. And they say if that had happened, it would have caused all kinds of equipment damage, fires, and whatnot, and we would have a blackout for months. And we've talked about what happens when you lose power, is people start dying fairly quick, and within about 60 days, just about everybody is dead by starvation at that point, unless you go after the last game in the area, which is humans. So it is a serious situation here. The good news is this afternoon we get about 4 hours of above freezing here. It gets back down to the 20s tonight, and then from that point on, we're what I saw, we're above freezing. There's tons and tons of broken pipes, lots of water damage, and frozen water damage. And, of course, plumbers need to clone themselves about 10 times over to try and get all this done. I'm also concerned that we're going to run out of supplies to fix things with. So I imagine, places like Home Depot and Lowe's and the like are going to run out of plumbing supplies to fix things. And it's still going to take a little while for the roads to thaw to get all these shipments to restock things. So we're going to be feeling the effects of this quite a bit over the next week. Once a lot of supplies come back, most of life will get back to normal. It's just a lot of these repairs are going to take time. And, I don't know what else you can do. We were lucky, though. We're not under boil order. Plus, we have our Berkey that even if we were under a boil order, we'd just be putting water in the Berkey and getting drinking water out. I've got enough water saved that I can refill the Berkey a couple of times, and that's enough water to get us through probably about a week. Like I say, we can't really complain. It was cold in here. I think the lowest I saw on the thermostat was 53, might have been 50. I didn't write numbers down, and everything's kind of a blur at this point. And it took until Wednesday afternoon to finally get it up into the upper 60s. They wanted us to set it at 68, and we actually went a bit more than that because it was still darn cold in here. And I guess I should, we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get back from the break.
Ragan's with us. 9 years we've been together. Captain John Ragan, U.S. Air Force Reserves, retired. And you've had some experience with the power grid distribution, etc., in Texas as an occupation. We'll be right back. All right, Captain John Ragan's with us. Captain John, I just have a couple comments based on what you said. Based on these temperatures, I'm forecasting that we are going to see shortages in the following areas. Car batteries. And the reason for that is if people have tried to start their cars and they crank the engine and they don't get it started and the battery does not get recharged from that starting, the electrolyte condition will be in a less than fully charged state, and the batteries will freeze closer to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And you mentioned that it got down to -1. So I predict that there's going to be a shortage of automotive batteries for sale because people are going to find out that they need a new battery because their batteries froze. And when a battery freezes in a car, truck, or equipment, I'm talking about lead acid battery, a flooded cell battery. That's really what they're called, a lead acid battery. When they freeze, they are physically damaged and you can't fix them. They're not fixable. So Even though if you want to, you can't fix a battery that's been frozen, lead acid battery. So I think there's going to be a shortage of those. I think there's going to be a shortage of radiators, which have burst, and heater cores in automobiles and trucks that have burst. I believe that there's going to be a shortage of antifreeze because once all these systems get fixed, they're going to have to be refilled with antifreeze. And I also believe that the pipes, as you mentioned, that we're going to find it, not just millions of pipes, tens of millions of pipes as they start to thaw out today and tomorrow and the next few days. People are going to find out how many pipes are broken and they're going to want them fixed. And as you said, the plumbers are going to be in short supply. But even more important than that is the parts that the plumbers need are going to be in short supply. And I'm talking about PVC, copper, pipe thread pipes, iron pipes, galvanized pipes, mostly PVC. That's going to be a big, big problem, in my opinion. And cracked engine blocks. And we're going to find that people have not had the antifreeze down to the protection level that they should have had for their area, in my opinion, because people have neglected their cars because, well, heck, all you have to do is wait for that change oil light to come on your dashboard to change the oil, and the engines are neglected. So I believe that the lack of antifreeze protection down to the level of -1 is going to cause cracked engine blocks, broken heater cores that provide heat inside a car, and cracked radiators. I think we're going to see that in all kinds of light trucks, heavy-duty trucks, and cars. And then, of course, the tractors, the farm-type tractors, they're going to have cracked blocks if the antifreeze was not at a sufficient level as well. So those are my thoughts about what's going to happen. And battery chargers. People are going to say, shoot, my car won't start, I need a battery charger. And they're going to be in short supply. Any comments about that, Captain John?
Well, let me just pile on. Right now there's shortages of gasoline. Some places are out. We've had some oil refineries knocked offline, which means that can take somewhere between days to weeks to get restarted. And that's going to affect not just Texas, but, other states as well. The gasoline supply, probably see gasoline prices go up if they haven't already. It's going to affect food. South Texas is a big citrus area, especially grapefruit. A lot of that crop is gone. Texas isn't so big for wheat, but there's a lot of areas that were affected by this. I understand about half of the winter wheat crop is gone. And it's, it could have been worse, but it was bad. It's about all I can say on that. What I was going to say before we hit the break, if you remember back in the days of doing the meetup, there was one time I brought some show and tell items, including these candles that I made from Crisco. And one of them I used a jelly jar, one of the small ones that's 18 ounces. And it's kind of nice because you have the lid you can put on it and just store it away. Well, I turned that thing on Monday, lit it up, and had it going until even after the power came back on, I left it on. So I had about 3 days of usage on that candle, and probably could have gotten a couple more days out of it. So that was a good investment that worked out.
From this break, would you share with us exactly how this Crisco candle is made very quickly, and just because I'm sure that there's some interest in that right now. We'll be right back with Captain John Ragan. Jason and I are diagnosing a electrical problem here at the studio. Captain John Ragan, please continue.
Yeah, you were asking about how to make one of these, and you could do it just by pushing a wick down into a can of Crisco, but since they aren't really cans anymore, they're cardboard, I really don't recommend that. Just go ahead and, melt some in a pan. It doesn't take much because it melts at a fairly low temperature. And like I said, I really like jelly jars. You could use other things. Use a wick. I think I used cotton twine. And you need something to hold that up. Whether it's anything that's longer than the opening on the jar that you can tie the string to, and you just pour it in, let it solidify, trim the wick, and put the lid on, and you've got yourself candles that like I say, this one lasted 3 days and probably could have lasted 2 more days, and that was burning at 24 hours. We just kept it in the bathroom as a night light, so we didn't have to use the energy from our phones and flashlight app all the time. But while that's a good use for Crisco type products, you do not want to use it to cook with, because that's trans fat, and that's one of the worst things you can put in your body. Second worst are the seed oils, linoleic acid. They're called vegetable oils. So whether it's corn or canola, any of those seed oils are bad. And I don't even know if we're going to get to that today. It's one of the main topics. And sugar, that would be good for putting on wounds to keep it from getting infected, but you don't want that table sugar in your body because it's really bad for your health too. We talked about that a couple of years ago, I think. And then below that is wheat, which besides what wheat can do, especially for people that have certain intolerances, if you get organic wheat, it's going to be contaminated with glyphosate, and that is bad for your gut microbiome, which is bad for your immune system and health. So those things that are common in prepper supplies, some of them can be used, but for the most part, you don't want that or any of those products in your daily life. It's consumables. I was listening to the news and remind me of a couple of other things. One, you've got a lot of ignorant reporters out there, and when the companies report the number of customers without power, these ignorant reporters will substitute the word people for customers, and that's not true. A customer is, basically the meter. So here for our apartment, that customer is 2 people. Our next door apartment, 2 adults, 2 kids, that's 4 people. So when you see that how many customers are without power, and granted some of those are business customers, but if you multiply that number by about 2.4, that would get you pretty close as to how many actual people are affected. And we talked about all of the different modes of production had problems, which boils down to bad winterization prep work in a lot of cases. And ERCOT, which is, again, the organization that basically controls the electricity on the grid, they made recommendations, but they couldn't make them mandatory. And the good news is the legislature is in session now, which only happens every 2 years in Texas, and we're probably going to see some laws change in that regard, requiring winterization. But they have to have a plan, but there's nothing saying they have to have the workings of the plan in place, which seems kind of ridiculous, but that's the way things are. So I guess stop there and see if there's any comments at this point.
Disaster recovery plan when I was in banking for the computer systems that I was responsible for, and the plan had to work, and I had to present it and I had to defend it, and the team that reported to me had to know how to implement it, and the plan had to be on file at a place where it could all be gotten to, and in case of an emergency. And I remember that we built a new data center we put in a halon fire extinguishing system. And, upon building the system, we charged it with carbon dioxide instead of halon because halon's expensive. We charged it with CO2 and tested it and made sure it worked. I mean, that's what we did. But that's because we had responsible management. But when you have a company that is interested in just profit, then the prevention seems to be treated with less importance than it should be. And so my question for you, Captain John Ragan, is do you have a focus for who is to blame at the highest level of this problem?
I guess the ultimate blame really is on the Texas legislature, because they did not create a law that made it mandatory that energy producers take on winterization efforts. And granted, this was an extreme event, but you cannot prepare for these things at the last minute. There's things that have to be taken, actions have to be taken weeks or months in advance. So, again, there's going to be hearings coming up very quickly, and I'm sure they will come up with appropriate legislation requiring, again, like I say, they've got plans. They just weren't implemented. Some of the actions may be fairly cheap. Some may cost more money. And all of that will work itself out over the next few weeks. So, again, it's not uncommon for when you have rare events that you don't spend the money to get ready. We talked about this over and over about preparation. People are not preparing for a grid down situation that can be caused, we're finding out now, even by the weather. And like I said, we came close to being, in the dark for months. But we've talked about on the air about how the sun can bring down the grid, how a high altitude nuclear blast can bring down the grid. And the amount of preparation and effort it takes to overcome that is beyond what people are willing and able to do. And if you want to prepare for that, you pretty much need to follow what was in Acts, where, the people, the new Christians sold off everything, created their own community. And, at that point, you weren't concerned about jobs. You weren't concerned about housing. You raised probably pretty much all of your own food. And none of that was electrical powered back then. And if we lived that way today, you'd be set. But people don't want to give up their technology. We don't have any, the closest we have are the Amish. But for 99.9% of America, we don't have churches that resemble that. We are so dependent on technology that when the power or internet, I got messages from our internet provider that, we expect service recovery at 7:30. Well, I don't know if we don't have internet or not because the power's out. It would take, it takes more than, just a handful of people to really be able to do that, because to really raise your own food requires, especially without any technology, requires people. It requires skills that we no longer have. It's probably a total 10 to 20 year learning curve just to be somewhat proficient. And that's why when whatever event happens, it's going to be so deadly. And I wish things would be different, but, people are either unable, they're just so darn busy because they have to make money to support their, even if it's a minimal lifestyle, the cost of housing is outrageous. In fact, we talked about, when I was on last time, it now takes 53 weeks of income to cover 52 weeks of expenses. And you were in this trap, and it would be very painful to get out of it, much less prepare for anything that's coming. Vincent?
Parents came to this country around 1900, and everything that they brought with them fit in one trunk. And today, a moving van may not be enough to fit, the possessions that a family may have. I was thinking, so over the last few days, I was thinking about where is the blame for this problem? And we agree. You mentioned the government in so many words, and I blame the government slightly differently. I blame it on the educational system, the public training camp, because we have been focusing on fluff. We've been focusing on feel good. We've been focusing on a history month for specific groups of people rather than just plain history. We have lost our way in the practical sciences, the practical skill sets. Now, please don't think that I'm a fan of Adolf Hitler. But Adolf Hitler got a few things right. Got a lot of things wrong, but he got a few things right. And one of them was that he felt that being healthy was very, very important. Good food was important. He felt that practical education was very important. Knowing how to do things and learning skills, he thought that was very important. Now, he put it to some pretty horrific uses, but he felt it was important. And what we've done is we've learned that everybody deserves a prize. Everybody who signs up gets to be on the team, those kinds of things. Whereas the competition to be the best has been lost. So we have destroyed, your government has destroyed the public training camp, the public school system, and we have gotten away from leadership that is educated. For example, the last time that we had a president of the United States who was a scientist and a farmer was in 1801, and that would be president number 3, Thomas Jefferson. We'll be right back. Jason fixed it, so through remote control, he was the brains behind the outfit, and I was pushing the buttons, and we got the signal fixed. Captain John, I mentioned that the last time we had a president that I know of who was a scientist and a farmer who actually knew what was going on was president number 3, 1801, Thomas Jefferson. The problem is we have selected for our viewing pleasure people who don't know what they're doing. People who vote for corn to ethanol, ethanol to gasoline, gasoline to the destruction of engines and carburetors. We have people who really don't know what they're doing, making rules, telling us what to do, and destroying the planet. And they've destroyed the educational system. We have taken away the building trades in many cases in favor of Microsoft Office. So we have keyboarding and mouse clicking and screen watching instead of reading, writing, arithmetic, history, hammering, sawing, construction, masonry, plumbing, electrical, etc. Auto mechanics. Right? Do you agree with that?
Well, it's actually even worse than that because it goes back. If you read the Communist Manifesto, which was written sometime in the first half of the 1800s, plank number 10 of the 10 things to do to convert a Western country to communism is free public education, because it's designed to indoctrinate the kids in things that really aren't meaningful, in fact, are detrimental to Western civilization. And they've done a fantastic job of that. I know we did a show before, or actually I guess it was the first time I was on the air by myself, and the guest dropped out. I went and launched into those 10 planks. And those are basically all implemented. There was 40-some goals that were read into the congressional record in the early 60s. We covered that on another show. Those are pretty much all implemented. So we're in the late stages, and instead of having, a Congress that's made up of ordinary people, business people and farmers that understand life, most of Congress are now people with law degrees, and that includes the 2 ex-senators that are now in the White House that's holding down the president and vice president slots. They have law degrees. So we have all of these smart people with law degrees. And keep in mind, the law they study is not God's law. It's this law that has been implemented. And basically the job of people with law degrees is to come up with ways of lying, cheating, and stealing without ramification. And that's what we have running our country now.
No disagreement. None whatsoever. John, I just wanted to let our class know that if you need an automotive battery, don't wait. Maybe you should call the Chinese factory outlet and get that battery that you need ordered, paid for, and go and have it curbside delivered. I wouldn't worry about the core, that $18 core. Worry about that later. But if you need a battery, I suggest you get it pronto. And if you need plumbing supplies, I suggest you get it pronto, because when the freezing abates and warmer, and the pipes start to warm up, you're going to see tens of millions of leaks, and that will make the news. It hasn't quite made the news yet, but it will. And even people who are prepared are going to find leaks. It's going to be a really, really serious problem, because so many contractors have built structures, houses, offices, etc., apartments, and they said to put in a shutoff valve, that's going to cost $4. We don't need it. And so there are absent shutoff valves that would make fixing a lot easier. So it's going to be very difficult to fix a lot of these problems because of the careless attitude and the for-profit attitude that has gone into the construction of them. Now, bear in mind, most of the buildings that you're going to see these failures manifest, you're going to realize that almost all of them have been inspected by building inspectors. All of them, or almost all of them. And then you're going to ask the question, how is it possible that we have government-paid building inspectors that inspected buildings that have had these catastrophic failures? How is that possible? John, any comments?
Well, the problem is where it's multifaceted. Our country is beyond broke. I've discussed that lots of times. In fact, I guess we'll get to talk about, what we'll do is talk about what I was going to talk about, and we'll have to schedule another time to talk about it.
Well, we can do that. We can do that. And this is all my fault. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us. 9 years we've been broadcasting together. Captain John, I just wanted to mention that I'm watching the screen and I'm seeing dropouts. So I am being disconnected and reconnected automatically by the digital stream. Nothing I can control. So if you don't hear me, just please continue. And if I don't hear you, I'll just continue, okay?
Okay.
So back to you.
I've made a post for today at financialstateoftheunion.com, and it includes a dozen videos that comprise about 10 hours of viewing time. So it would be tough to even try and summarize those in 2 broadcast hours. And I've got some links, links we won't have time for, and had a few links for today's discussion. And it's, I'm not even sure we're going to have time to talk about why I put these things up. And it's also important, if you didn't attend the Friday the 13th show in November, to go back and look at that post. Also, there's a video in there on the carnivore diet, which ties into what's going to be talked about with the Great Reset. So it's a lot of pieces to put together for what's coming up. And I just want to put time frames in focus. 9/11 is going to be 20 years ago this year. Fukushima is going to be 10 years ago next month. The Great Reset is planned by 2030, which is less than 10 years from now. So there's a lot upcoming, and I see the pathway that they can use to get there. One way is they do it hardcore to implement it. The other way is they pretend to be our savior to rescue us. Either one of those paths, it's the same results. However, there's, I believe, one way we can throw a big wrench in their works, because their plans count on using man-made carbon dioxide as a tool to control every part of your lives. And we've talked about it before. If you're not familiar, there's an organization called the IPCC, that's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And for 4 decades, the the models they put out for the solar forcing, all they used was solar irradiance. That's sunlight, which varies slightly over the 11-year solar cycle. So when you're building this model for climate change, and you've accounted for all of the natural forces, then the other causes are man-made. And what they have done up till now is put that into carbon dioxide. Now, even 15 years ago, I saw the charts. When you go back millions of years, charting carbon dioxide levels and temperature, way back when, the temperature changed before carbon dioxide did. There is no correlation between the two. And just because there has been some correlation in modern times, that doesn't mean causation. And it's true, you have to have correlation to have causation, even if the correlation is a negative correlation. But when you don't have any correlation, that cannot be causation. And what changed with CMIP6, which the final report will be coming out next year, 2022, that's the first model that includes other solar forcing besides solar irradiance. And all of the papers that have used the CMIP6 solar forcing have concluded it is the sun and not CO2 that is causing the changes. And if we can get that science out, which is going to be tough with all of the control of media being in the hands that they are, the censorship is horrendous. But if we can get that science out and into the public, that will take away the excuses that governments worldwide have on controlling our lives through the use of all kinds of restrictions on carbon-based energy, which is the basis of our entire economy and lifestyle. So, CMIP, Coupled Model Intercomparison Project. You can look those things up. The Suspicious Observers channel has playlists on climate change. You can learn a whole lot more about that. Ben Davison, who runs that channel, he reads tons and tons and tons of papers. These are from institutions around the world. It's not kiddies in their basements with theories. These are PhD researchers doing the work. So that is the biggest threat in our future. And the driving factor on that is the World Economic Forum run by billionaire Klaus Schwab. And you can go check this out at their website, which they shortened World Economic to WE, W-E, weforum.org. And I got a link there for the Great Reset. And while you're on the site, I recommend scrolling down to the bottom and clicking on the partners link. And they have so many partners, it's broken down alphabetically. And the companies and organizations that they have working with them, you'll understand the magnitude of what we have to overcome. And I went in and looked because, I expected certain companies to be there, like, Facebook and Google and Apple. What surprised me, though, is when I went to look up Amazon itself was not in there. However, Amazon Web Services is. And that is telling as well, because Amazon Web Services, that is, where a lot of the cloud is. All the data storage, which you need the data in order to do the processing on all the data in order to control people's lives. And remember, it was Amazon Web Services that kicked Parler off. They denied them access to the platform. And now that Bezos has resigned, it is the former head of Amazon Web Services that is the CEO of Amazon. And the short reading form is my second link in the for discussion, The World in 2030, according to the WEF. And this explains how basically it's an implementation of communism. But in the past, we've had first off, they've complained that the reason it didn't work is because there were, non-communist countries out there, and that caused problems. But there's also the issue of, economies are big, complex things, and even the smartest people, don't know everything. They have to wait on information to get to them. They have to digest that information. But when you have everything surveilled, and you have this huge amount of data, and instead of using people, you use an artificial intelligence, now they can allocate resources in real time to satisfy the desires of those in power. The IMF, another organization, International Monetary Fund, is getting in on the action too. I got a link there, your new credit score. And this is kind of similar to what China is doing. You have a social credit score. Well, they're talking about your credit score being at least partially based on the websites you visit. So if you visit, sites like mine or, others that, don't toe the party line, you could find your credit score reduced, which affects things like, getting credit at all, paying more for rent or mortgages if you can get it, getting a job or not. So they've really got a great plan on controlling your life. I've also got some health things, how linoleic acid wrecks your health. And on the B1 deficiency, that's not just happening in humans, but throughout the food chain. And those, really deserve some discussion. Again, I just took a whole segment just explaining what they were. I know we're getting close to the break, too. Let me cover one of the items at the bottom of the links we don't have time for. CIA stops reporting money supply. And this goes back to, from the very beginning when I started talking about the financial state of the union, I used the CIA World Factbook to give a comparison so that you can at least kind of get a grasp for how big our problem is. And when you use the better estimate of our Social Security and Medicare unfunded liabilities that Professor Kotlikoff does, which is based off the CBO model, not the model that the trustees use, it would take more than twice all the money, using the broad definition of money, which includes deposit accounts. Narrow definition is basically what you think of as cash. All the money in the world, twice over, invested at, I believe it was 2.9% interest, just to meet what's been promised. And that's assuming all the assumptions with the CBO were accurate, which I've talked about for years. Neither one of those models had a recession in there. And with COVID, not only do we have the recession, we've got millions of job losses, which reduces the income. And in coming back, they're going to put more automation in. Have a nice day.
Yeah, class, if you'd like to go to that website, that's thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. That's John Ragan's website. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us. And Captain John, I was thinking that for about 40 years now, at least 30 years, that our educational system has been in a steep decline. And that is so indicative of the situation we're in today. And if you look at people who were caught by surprise that this storm was going to interrupt gasoline, electricity, water, the in-stock items in supermarkets, if you look at what people's reactions happened to be, they were stunned. They didn't think this would happen. And that's because they weren't paying attention. And there was a mayor of a town in Texas who just lost his temper, and he blamed these people for being lazy and saying, that that is, they need to take care of themselves. Well, he's absolutely right. In that respect, people do need to protect and their own families, defend their own families, and prepare for their own families. And themselves. That's absolutely true. But they've been led to slaughter by the government training camp, letting people think and believe that someone's going to take care of it for you. Don't worry about it. We've got water, we've got food, we've got shelter, we've got electricity. Everything's going to be okay. Well, it's not okay. And so they've been led to slaughter, and they're stunned. And this storm in Texas, as horrific as it has been, and as deadly as the outcome has been, has taught people that they are on their own. There is no one coming. Any comments about that, Captain John?
It won't change much, because when things get back to normal, they'll go back to their usual lives. I don't see any big movement on the horizon to make any kind of real change. I wish there were, but it's not in human nature. It's not in prophecy, and in fact, that kind of ties in. The first link that we won't have time for is American Minute, which is Bill Federer's site. This article is on Billy Sunday, which we've talked about before. Billy Sunday was a big baseball star in the late 1800s, and he turned evangelist and was active till like 1935, which was his death. In 1914, he talked about how we were in need of a revival because our churches had become third-rate amusement joints. And I believe if he could come back today, he would declare that our churches have become just first-rate entertainment centers, which is part of the reason America is in the problem it is. And one of the reasons I'm not optimistic goes back to one of the lessons out of Exodus. And I sum that up as you can take the slave out of Egypt, but you can't take Egypt out of the slave. And you think about all the miracles that Israel saw during the Exodus, and they still would not change their hearts, which is why they basically had to die off before Israel was allowed to progress into the Promised Land. And because these people have been indoctrinated for so long, not just in the United States, but across the world, you're not going to change most of them. You have to wait for those people to die off to have a change. And that's going to cause all kinds of ramifications. I've talked about the demographic portion of our situation where birth rates are not enough to even keep the population stable, and that has a financial aspect. And all of these programs that we have now that are already overpromised, when you have less people paying into that, like I was talking about with, the lesser jobs, and whether it was through firings or automation, it just snowballs.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that Social Security, one of the things that you're saying is that Social Security that many people are depending upon is unstable and will collapse. We'll be right back with Captain John Ragan. Class, let me give you a statistic. We reported this many years ago, and it's probably still true. You heard at the top of the hour, bottom of the hour news, that the water is still unsafe for many Texans to drink. And why is that? Well, one of the reasons is that the average water treatment plant in the United States has about 2 weeks' worth of chemical supplies on hand in order to treat their water. So if that's the average, there are treatment plants with more and there are treatment plants with less than 14 days worth of chemicals to treat the plants, the water in the plants. And then you add on top of that the lack of electricity to run the pumps. So put all that together, and the water for many Texans is unsafe. So is that anything new? No, that's nothing new. And many times when there's a serious, severe rainstorm, the water treatment plant cross-connects with the sewage treatment plant, and raw or untreated sewage connects with the fresh water supply, and you get a chance to drink it. So beware. And what do you do about that? Well, you have a water filtration system on hand. You have a little bit of chlorine bleach to disinfect the water. But bear in mind, drinking chlorine will kill you. And it was used in World War I to kill people. Chlorine gas. My grandfather was gassed in World War I with chlorine. So it's a double-edged sword. Don't believe anything we say. Do your own homework and make up your own mind. Don't believe anything that you hear on the radio, because I've actually heard people say that COVID is fake, fraud, and, to use their terms, BS, which is absolutely not true. Captain John?
Yeah, we talked about that before. From the evidence I've seen, there was a genetic insertion into this virus. I believe it was an accident at the lab, not something intentionally released. If they had meant for this to be used as a weapon, you would have released it in lots of places at the same time, not try and rely for a spread the way that it did. So, it's real. It's not quite as deadly as we hoped. It is very damaging. There's important things, reducing your inflammation, which almost everybody has nowadays, having proper amounts of vitamin D. And the sad thing is there's treatments available that were censored out, that there's finally getting to be some research studies that are making their way out where there's a couple of drugs, especially combined with zinc in the early days. If you wait until you've had a virus for more than a few days, like even Tamiflu, if you've had the flu for more than 3 days, Tamiflu is not going to do you any good. If you get it early with these treatments, you tend to have pretty good outcomes. And to me, that's a whole lot better than trying what's not even a real vaccine. It's a genetic manipulation. The vaccines are, I guess all but the Russian one, is this messenger RNA, which has never been approved for use on humans. Remember, we just have an emergency use authorization for these vaccines. And what these mRNA vaccines, in quote, do is they make your cells create the spikes that COVID has. Your immune system sees the spikes and creates antibodies based on that. What they don't go tell you is that, when the immune system reacts, that means your body, your immune system, is attacking your own cells, which by definition is an autoimmune condition. Now, the question is, how long does that modification last? Is it only there temporary? If it is temporary, how long is it there? And if it's not temporary, if it's permanent, you've got an autoimmune condition for life. So I haven't seen any research come out on answering those questions yet, which is why I'm not lining up for a jab.
Neither am I, and neither is Norm, and neither is Rich Sheben, and neither is Gwyneth. None of the regular USA Prepares instructors is lining up for that jab. There are 2 instructors that have decided to get it. One has already gotten the second jab and is still doing fine. The other one is in queue for it. So we'll report, without their names as to what the results have been as we progress, but I'm not getting it. No one in our family is getting it, and no one in our family, our immediate family, has gotten COVID-19 that we know of. We've been very, very careful. But Captain John, this situation in Texas is a real wake-up call for those who want to be prepared. It's a great learning experience, how difficult as it may be, brutal as it may be, but it can teach us a lot. And, when you said that not much is going to change, I've got to tell you, I'm with you. And I'll tell you why. We offered 3 times to secure a property here in Missouri, starting at around $1,200 an acre, where people we could build a village, and we could live cooperatively. You could own your own land, build your own cabin, etc. We could have solar power, wind power. We could have village buildings, village farming, village gardens. I mean, everybody could work together. You could own it. It wouldn't be like a cooperative where you don't own it. You'd own it. And we only got, in the years that we've done this, I think maybe 5 tire kickers, maybe. And when I say tire kickers, I mean people remotely interested. So I believe you're absolutely right. Even now, people might think about it, but not really seriously. And here we are. I'm looking at an image on the internet of people with their buckets and their coolers and they're waiting for water because they have no water. And they're filling buckets, 5-gallon buckets with water to take home to wherever they are. They're standing freezing because they can't get water. And so everything has come to a grinding halt in their lives. And what are they going to do about it? I don't know. But, you look at the people who have, gotten into these there's a furniture store that's opened up the doors and said, hey, come on in. We've got some food. And what are they doing? They're all on their phones. They're looking at their phones. They've got their feet up on the furniture, and they're sitting, eating on recliners, cloth recliners. I can't believe it. I mean, if I invited people to come in to get out of the cold and they were eating out of their laps on my furniture, I'd throw them out. I mean, there are plenty of tables there that they could sit at. No, they're just sitting on the furniture, reclining. It's crazy to me. So, I don't know. Education, the lack of education is a very expensive thing, and we're witnessing it firsthand. And I've been calling this concentrated ignorance. Now, it's not ignorance concentrated in just a few people. It's ignorance that's concentrated individually. So more people have more ignorance each than I've ever seen in my entire life. Like grand stupidity on an individual's, each individual is dumber than I can believe. And then collectively, it's a real serious problem. Any comments?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I wrote a post about how I'd spent 30,000 hours in education. A small part of that was my master's program, and the rest was work that resulted in a few hundred hours of shows that I've done with you. And with that 30,000 hours, I'm just slightly less ignorant. I tell you, there's so much, and I think a lot of people aren't even capable of understanding. But it goes beyond that. The deception is so bad that, people have faith in things that they shouldn't have faith in, and that includes the fake dollars that we use. And, once things happen and like the dollar collapses, then people will believe you, but by then it's too late to do anything.
Right. And, a long time ago, I realized that you could be trapped by a mortgage. I've never had car payment. Never. I've only paid cash for vehicles and I buy used vehicles. But for me, I've learned a long time ago that you could be absolutely a slave to your house. And there are people who are living in homes that don't realize that they don't have to live there. They think they have to live there, but they don't have to live there. They could move. They could go to a lower cost of living area, but they feel trapped because of the JOB. So they have a JOB and they have a house or an apartment or a mobile home or wherever they're living, and their family's living there, generally speaking. And they're in gridlock because the family's living there. They don't want to get away from the family, so they're all trapped. To me, I moved away. And it was one of the best things I've ever done, is become a farmer. But there's no, unless you are getting government handouts, there is no wealth in becoming a farmer. It's just hard work, but you don't starve. Any comments about that?
I could, but we're running out of time. There's so much more I want to try and cover today. But we've talked about electricity. In Texas, there's 3 types of plans you can buy. One's a fixed rate plan, which is what we're on. There's a variable rate plan, and there's an indexed plan. And if you're on a variable or indexed plan, people are seeing bills in the thousands. One guy has 3 meters for 3 different places. His bill's $17,000. You're going to see more and more stories of that come out. And as bad as that is for the individuals, even the people that have the fixed rate plans, the companies that they're buying their plans through could go bankrupt because they're still going to have to pay for power unless they're hedged out to protect themselves from those types of spikes. It's outlandish. But
so the only way that this could happen, this variable rate, the only way I can think of that happening would be with smart meters. Is that correct?
Well, a little bit, but it gets to be what the price of electricity is at the time, and it went up a tremendous amount as the supply dropped.
Right, thousands of percent, like 3,000%. But how would they say, well, yeah, but that was Tuesday that it was this much, Wednesday it was more, etc. We'll be right back. Captain John, back to you.
Yeah, I want to set up why I am so big on you learning about linoleic acid. And this goes back to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We started down to visit far south Texas to explore as a place to live. And we spent Thanksgiving with some of Becky's family in the Houston area. Well, we didn't even get out of Dallas County when I got a nosebleed. And I started having 2 nosebleeds a day, and I was able to get them stopped within 20 minutes, which, reading online, doctors aren't concerned if you can get them stopped in that time frame. Well, that Saturday evening, I had a nosebleed that I couldn't get stopped until after 2 hours. And we were scheduled to come back Sunday anyway. But 1:30 Sunday morning, I had another nosebleed start, and at that day, it's fun trying to get dressed and drive when you're trying to keep the blood from going all over everywhere. And so we packed up the car and we headed to the emergency room for the VA hospital in Houston. And as part of the process, they take your blood pressure. Well, they attempted to for me. The problem is it was too high for their machine. They estimate my blood pressure was 300 over 165. And that's probably going to be a record for the doctors and nurses that saw me. I understand that that's higher than the record for Duke Medical Center in trying to make comparisons. Now, it's true, people like weightlifters can get like 400 over 200 blood pressure when they're doing the lift, but that's a temporary thing. The at-rest blood pressure, this is, it's amazing. I'm still here in one piece. Now, just a quick side on that. That was Sunday, November 29th. Well, Sunday, November 29th, 1970, 50 years before, my dad died in the VA hospital in Houston. So that was an eerie coincidence. And I've got other stories on blood pressure, but to save time, one of the big factors in that is linoleic acid. Now, the omega-6s, which is what you get in the seed oils, about 90% is linoleic acid. It causes all kinds of problems in your system. I've got 2 videos on it. Each one is over 2 hours. And, I really, really, really recommend that you watch those to understand just how bad it is. You do not want to put the stuff in your body. And what you do have in your body, it has a half-life of 600 to 680 days. 680 days is getting darn close to 2 years, and you still have half of it. It means after 3 years, you're down to 25%, and that's if you totally stop consuming the stuff. So it's going to take years to eliminate and start repairing the damage that this stuff has done. The only thing worse than linoleic acid are the trans fats. And right after linoleic acid, I put sugar, fructose in particular, which is table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and even, other natural things like maple syrup. All these things have a high amount of fructose. If you eat a small amount of fruit whole, your body can handle that. But once you start doing things like even making orange juice, it no longer has the fiber, and your liver has to handle that fructose. And I also talked about, the wheat, which, even if nothing else, you got the glyphosate to deal with, which damages your gut microbiome, which affects your immune system. So it's a lot to try and put together and understand. And sadly, your frontline medical doctors, the clinicians, do not know most of this knowledge. you have to go to the researchers and the MDs that have read the researchers to get the latest knowledge on what affects your health, because it takes when I was looking at a series on the gut microbiome, they said it takes 17 years from the researcher to the clinician, and I think that's optimistic. And that's one of the reasons why I put the video in there about the doctor who learned to wash his hands. And he died going crazy from trying to teach other doctors that they should be washing their hands. And today, it's the doctors are killing us with drugs and bad advice.
Except for Dr. Norm Shealy. And any comments?
You have to find the educated ones, and they're not easy to find.
Right. Dr. Norm Shealy. And he's on with us for 2 hours a week, Mondays, 9 through 11 a.m. Central Time. Captain John, we're going to have to schedule more time, so whenever you're ready, just let me know, and we'll make it happen. It'll be a Thursday or a Friday, so just let me know. Captain John, Thank you so much for being with us.